Welcome, everyone, to the Entertainment Arena, your go to source for all things entertainment, sports, and gaming, from business news to hot takes. I'm Thomas Schultz. Thank you for joining me again. Now, let's get to it. It's been a great week, and we're going to kick it off with the NFL Conference Championship weekend. And now we know the Super Bowl is set. This past weekend, the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers punched their tickets to Las Vegas to face each other in Super Bowl 58. Now, both games saw a high viewership of over 50 million viewers, which is the first time since 2014 that both CBS and Fox garnered 50 million plus viewers. And both of those audiences were the largest audiences ever for both the NFC and the AFC championship games this year. We kind of have a suspicion that a certain pop artist may have helped with the AFC Championship games and Taylor Swift. And for the NFC Championship game, the Detroit Lions' Cinderella storybook season comes to an end. So now we're at a sort of a bye week with the Pro Bowl. Pro Bowl. The attention will, though, turn to Sin City throughout the week as the teams get ready to get there and start practicing, as well as all the marketing and promotion that's going to be happening in the city. This is the first time the Super Bowl will be in Las Vegas and held at Allegiant Stadium. And if there's anything that's guaranteed, it's that it's going to be a party. It was recently announced that Tiesto will be the DJ inside of Allegiant Stadium during the game, which is a continuing trend that the Raiders have done throughout the season as they host popular DJs within Allegiant Stadium to be the in-game entertainment. Names such as Steve Aoki, Knife Party, and Marshmello have all performed during games for the Raiders. And so Tiesto will continue that trend as he has been one of the longest running residence DJs on the Vegas Strip. We know there's going to be some massive parties at the clubs in Vegas as well. And that could probably lead to another viral moment from a Kelsey brother, particularly Jason Kelsey. God, it's just such a great picture. Be sure to tune into the Sports Hangover as Mike and Jeremy will have in-depth previews and coverage of the Super Bowl leading up to the big game, and you can catch it on Sunday, February 11th on CBS and Paramount Plus. Now, with the Super Bowl comes a lot of commercials, and those commercials include movie trailers. And so I thought, let's get into the movies for 2024. We haven't really been able to talk about them this much, especially since we're in sort of a lull period with the shows and movies that were halted during the strike starting to slowly come out. And while there's a decent amount of TV coming out, we're finally getting our first big releases of the year. Agent Argyle from Universal is our first big cast ensemble movie coming out this weekend, and unfortunately it's been receiving some pretty poor reviews and continuing that trend that started off in 2023. It's currently sitting at 35% on Rotten Tomatoes, being called boring, sluggish, and very bad pacing, even with a great cast. But what about the rest of the year? I wanted to look ahead to the first half of the year, so January to about end of June, early July, and look at some of the big movies that are slated to come out. Now, please keep in mind, this isn't every single movie that's coming out, as certain movies like The Fall Guy starring Ryan Reynolds, Inside Out Part 2 starring Amy Poehler, the popular Pixar movie, is going to be coming out around that time as well. But these are just some of the big ones that are going to kick off the year, and unfortunately, I'm going to start it off on a bad note as Madam Web comes out in a couple weeks. Now, Madam Web is from Sony Pictures in association with Marvel, not Marvel Studios, even though Kevin Feige, who is the co-creative chairman of Marvel's Entertainment, does give insight into all Marvel projects. This film stars Dakota Johnson and Sydney Sweeney. Dakota Johnson plays Cassandra Webb, and she's forced to confront her past while trying to survive with three young women in New York City with powerful futures who are being hunted by a deadly adversary. Now, these three women all have spider powers like Spider-Man. Now, unfortunately, we've only received one trailer, and again, like I said, this movie comes out on February 14th, so it's 2 weeks. We still don't know much about the film. We know, though, that Adam Scott of Parks and Recreation fame is in the film and is rumored to be playing a young Ben Parker, who Spider-Man fans know as Uncle Ben or the uncle of Peter Parker. This film is also part of Sony's extended Spider-Man universe. So like Venom and Morbius, we don't know much about the Spider-Man that's in their universe. Rumors have it that it could be Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, as this film is supposedly set in the early 2000s and could be laying the groundwork for Maguire's Parker showing up in a later film. We both know that Sony and Marvel Studios want Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, excuse me, to return, both for Avengers Secret Wars and Spider-Man 4. So it wouldn't be shocking if they continue to lay groundwork for their return. But this film doesn't look or sound that great. Sony has actually struggled with these films, with both Venom and Morbius not getting much critical acclaim or being popular, despite Venom being financially successful and is currently filming a third iteration that's going to come out later this year. The only reason this film is being included is because of the star power, with Dakota Johnson's name growing because of 50 Shades of Grey franchise and Sydney Sweeney having a huge launch to her career with Euphoria. This film also sees a pretty big competitive film in One Love, the Bob Marley biopic starring Kingsley Benadir as Bob Marley. That looks pretty good. Now, both films, like I said, are scheduled to come out in 2 weeks on February 14th, so we'll see exactly how that plays out. So, from one disappointing film to what's not going to disappoint in Dune Part 2. Now, this is probably the biggest release of the first quarter, if not the entire year. Dune Part 2 is directed by Denis Villeneuve and stars Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Josh Brolin, Austin Butler, Florence Pugh, Dave Bautista, Christopher Walken, Rebecca Ferguson, Stellan Skarsgård, and Javier Bardem. What a cast! Now, Dune Part 2 continues the story of Paul Atreides, who's played by Timothée Chalamet, who is reunited with Shani, Zendaya, and the Freeman. He's seeking revenge on the conspirators who destroyed his family. Those conspirators are led by Stellan Skarsgård. Facing choices of love and fate of the universe, he must prevent a terrible future that only he can foresee. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of Dune Part 1, and that probably could have been because it was slow, it was boring, had bad pacing, in my opinion. But what I thought lacked in story made up in star power in the visuals. It didn't also help that Part 1 was released during the COVID pandemic and one of Warner Brothers' first day-and-date releases in theaters and HBO Max on the same day. Now, with Dune Part 2, you'll want to see this on a premium format if you can. IMAX, Dolby Cinema, Cinemark XD. And that's because Denis Villeneuve is one of the best visual directors out there. All of his films are shot perfectly and really make you feel like you're part of the film. This film is going to be coming out in March, so you want to get ready to see it as soon as possible. Following up on Dune will be Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Now, the Ghostbusters franchise did hit a bit of a bump with Ghostbusters Who You Gonna Call, the female reboot, but then had a great revival after Ghostbusters Afterlife, which saw Egon Spengler's grandchildren continue the legacy of the original Ghostbusters. Now, the original crew with Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Ernie Hudson are returning for this film. And they're going to be going up against a brand new villain, along with a familiar foe from Ghostbusters and Walter Peck, played once again by William Atherton. It's nice to see the legacy getting a fun continuing story, especially with likable names in today's society like Paul Rudd and Kumail Nanjiani going alongside the original cast of Aykroyd, Murray, and Hudson. I'm a big Ghostbusters fan, and I enjoyed the last outing, especially seeing the nice little tribute that was paid off to Harold Ramis after his sad passing. This looks to be a great continuation of the franchise and a lot of fun, and it's coming out in theaters on March 22nd. Following that, it's the return of Poe, now an animated film in Q1. That's not a bit of a shocker, but what was the shocker is that this is the sequel that no one expected. It was never reported that Kung Fu Panda 4 was coming, and so the drop of a surprise trailer at the beginning of the year was a great thing to see. Now, after Poe is tapped to become the spiritual leader of the Valley of Peace, he needs to find and train a new dragon warrior, while a wicked sorceress plans to resummon all the master villains whom Poe has vanquished to the spirit realm. Again, we are now seeing that this film, with that surprise trailer, has skyrocketed to the top of a lot of people's animated movie of the year list. It's because the Kung Fu Panda franchise is one of the most beloved out there. DreamWorks franchises continue to kill it, and we know that they're very popular, which is leading to the How to Train Your Dragon franchise getting a live-action remake even. We're going to see Jack Black return as Poe. We also see the returns of Dustin Hoffman, Bryan Cranston, and Ian McShane, along with some newcomers like Awkwafina and 2 Academy Award winners in Viola Davis and Ke Huy Kwang, aka Short Round from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Goonies, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. This fun sequel is set to hit theaters in March 29th. Following up on that, the Planet of the Apes franchise is one of the longest running franchises in Hollywood history, dating back to the original release in '68. Continuing the story that started with Rise of the Planet of the Apes, this film is going to take place many years after the reign of Caesar with his heir, a young ape named Proximus Caesar. He goes on a journey that will lead him to question everything he's been taught about the past and make choices that will define a future for apes and humans alike. Now, this franchise has always been a great one to watch and see expand, especially with the visuals of how the apes and how they have human-like characteristics. That will continue to be showcased, especially with today's advancements in movie technology. Now, expect plenty of action and drama as Disney is looking to relaunch and continue this franchise that's been successful over the years. Remember, Disney got this in the Fox merger. So this franchise now belongs to Disney and they want to make sure it continues to grow. There's no doubt that the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes will continue to see a winning streak for the franchise, though, and we'll see a big crowd in theaters when it hits theaters on May 10th. And now, something that we're not used to seeing in today's film landscape, and that's an original story. If Imaginary Friends comes from the creative mind of John Krasinski and brings us into the fantastical world of Imaginary Friends. The story sees a young girl named Bee, played by Kaylee Fleming, who we've actually seen as young Rey Skywalker in Star Wars The Force Awakens in flashback scenes. This is going to see Bee going through a difficult experience and beginning to see everyone's imaginary friends that have been left behind as those people have grown up. She then realizes that her neighbor, who's played by Ryan Reynolds, has the same ability. This film will be a classic, in my opinion. It's going to feature an all-star cast with Fleming, Reynolds, John Krasinski will also be in it, along with directing it. Fiona Shaw, Steve Carell, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Maya Rudolph, Jon Stewart, Sam Rockwell, and many, many more surprise names, supposedly. You'll want to be sure you're in the theater for this, so it's hitting theaters on May 17th, and get ready for a fun one. And finally, a big action-packed thriller with the Mad Max franchise returning to theaters, except in a prequel form. Charlize Theron's Furiosa was raved about in Mad Max Fury Road, and fans wanted to know more about her, and they got their wish. With Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, we get to see Anya Taylor-Joy take on the role of Furiosa and how she became the character that everyone loved. Chris Hemsworth stars as the antagonist, Dementus, who will look to keep Furiosa from returning to her home as he leads the war over the Citadel, the same war that's been growing throughout the Mad Max saga. George Miller does return to write and direct this film, and what's only going to continue the action-packed action that we see in a Mad Max movie. I expect this to get a lot of Academy Awards talk come the end of the year for the sound mixing, the set design, the wardrobe, so it's going to look good. It's a Memorial Day weekend release with May 24th. Now, there's one franchise, there's one franchise that everyone has been looking for a break. That franchise is one that we usually see have about 1 to 2 projects come out a year, especially at the beginning. And that's the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that's leading me to my what to watch for. What to watch for. What to watch for. The segment where I make a prediction based on the news that's going on in sports and entertainment. And back in 2019, the Fox-Disney merger was complete. And with Disney owning the Marvel properties now, the cinematic rights of the X-Men and Fantastic Four returned to Marvel, and that included Deadpool. Now, the Deadpool franchise has been one of the most popular franchises in that it delivers something fresh to the fans, making fun of superhero films while being one itself, since Deadpool is considered an anti-hero. It's also one of the most financially successful superhero franchises, as it's grossed $1.57 billion globally combined between Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2. That's surprising considering that this franchise, both of the films are R-rated. So when Marvel got the rights, they immediately called Ryan Reynolds in for a movie and said, get to work, essentially. The film got announced to be being made by Ryan Reynolds, and in fact, in 2022's announcement, he's brought back the surprise of Hugh Jackman reprising his role as James Howlett, aka Logan, aka Wolverine. It's been predicted that the multiverse will play a big factor in this film and sort of be a killing off of the Fox X-Men universe, according to set leaks. Now, I'm not going to be posting any pictures here if you're watching the YouTube feed, but you can sure find those leaked photos of the set and see why that's rumors out there. They're sort of comparing this to a Spider-Man No Way Home movie for the X-Men, like that film was for Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Willem Dafoe, Jamie Foxx, and Alfred Molina. Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, among other X-Men actors, are rumored to be returning to the film. And this film will be tying into the larger MCU canon. And it'll also be the first R-rated film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And knowing Deadpool, this film will have all sorts of surprises, and the synopsis that was recently released by Marvel and Disney only helps that even more by saying, quote, the irresponsible hero Deadpool will change the history of the MCU with Wolverine? Well, the film recently wrapped filming, and rumors are already flying around that we'll be getting the first teaser during the Super Bowl on February 11th. And that leads me to my prediction. I think that Deadpool 3 will not only save the MCU, sort of, but we'll also see Ryan Reynolds, Wade Wilson make more appearances in the Marvel franchise with crossovers. That could be both film, Disney, and Disney Plus shows. I also think that Deadpool 3 will be in the top 3 of the global box office grosses this year. And that's not just because I think right now the box office, the slate is looking a little weaker, mainly because a lot of films like Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 2, which is being retitled, and Captain America Brave New World were moved to 2025. But I also just think we're in a little bit of that lull because of this writer and actor strikes of last year. So a lot of films will be made. Now, that's not to say that films coming out in Q3 and Q4 won't do great, especially when we know holiday timing does well. And there are a couple big films that are coming out later in the year, which we'll talk about later in the year as well, like Mufasa, the Lion King prequel. But I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see when this happens on July 26th when Deadpool 3 hits theaters. And that's it for this week's Entertainment Arena. Thank you for listening. Make sure you check out the sportshangover.com. Bunch of swag and gear up on the site. We've got a bunch of Taylor Swift Chiefs gear that you could get before the Super Bowl if you order ASAP. It can get to you as swiftly as possible. Yeah, I had to do it. Check us out on Instagram at @the_sports hangover, TikTok at the sports hangover, and our YouTube channel if you're not watching. And again, for more sports and entertainment and gaming news, make sure you come back to the Entertainment Arena. I'll also be starting up a new YouTube exclusive series called Real Reviews for movie and TV reviews of both old and new films and shows. That's going to be coming very soon. Until then, take care, and I'll talk to you next week.